So in this example, I want to build an application which will going to take an input from the user, and on processing, I want to generate a useful output in another text box. Same example where I have the label name, I'll change my label to label. I'll use the same example. Okay. So label will going to be KGLBL. Inside the graphical user interface, I want to change my layout from flow layout to grid layout. And I would like to have 3 rows and each row having 2 columns. So in every row, I want to have a label and a text box in the first and the third row. And in the middle row, I want to have the 2 buttons. So every row will have 2 components. Now I'm going to start adding them in the same order that I want them to appear. So I'm going to add to my container. The first thing is KGLBL. Next, I'm going to add KGTXT. Then I'm going to add my reset button. Now I'm going to add my process button. Then I'm going to add pounds LBL. And then I'm going to add pounds TXT. So label, text field, button, button, label, text field. 2 per row. Okay. Now let's scroll down in the graphical user interface application. Let's get rid of everything inside action perform. We're going to leave it empty for now. And inside the main method, we got the sizing, and let's change the title to conversion form. 140, let me do 140, and I'm going to add some spacing here. That's better. Okay. So these are. Now I have more than one button between which button was clicked. Okay. Now before I do that, I also need to make sure that the action listener is also added to reset button, because right now it is only added to process button. If arg0, which is the name of the action event object, arg0 will hold the reference to which button was clicked. So if arg0 dot get source equals process, then do this. Otherwise, if arg0 dot get source equals reset, then do this. So this is how you can write an if-else-if blocks. This is so unlike VB or C#, because in VB or C# you have events associated and tied to objects. Here you have one generalized event where it differentiates between the objects using an action event object. Now inside the body of reset, arg0 is the name of the action event object, which will going to hold a reference of which button was clicked. So when reset button was clicked, it passes a reference this, that I am clicked. So that reference is passed over to arg0. So arg0 will know which one of the 2 was clicked. Unlike VB, where click event is tied to an object, so you don't need to make this extra pass because every object has its own click event tied to it. Here we have one generalized action perform, which will work for all items that are clicked. So now it needs to differentiate who was clicked. Okay, so this arg0 is being used through the method getSource to figure out which one of the buttons were clicked. That is why I declared all my buttons outside of the constructor, so they are available to the entire program. Otherwise, if they were in the constructor, action perform would not not have been able to see them because they will be local to the constructor. So if I would have, let's say if I push this line inside the constructor, there are no errors here. Let me take this out. Okay. There are no errors here, but action perform doesn't see it because it's local to constructor. That is why we have to make sure that anything that is shared between multiple methods must be global. Now here inside the body of getSource, what I want to do is I simply want to reset both of my text boxes. So I'll say kgtxt.setText. I want to set the text to nothing for kg, and pounds txt.setText. I also want to set the text of pounds txt to nothing. Now let's test this much of the code. Let's run it. Let's put some data in kilograms and let's click reset. Of course, pounds will have no output in it because the process button does not have any code in it. But when you click reset, notice the kilogram box is now emptied out. Got it? Okay. Now we will going to go to process. In the process, I want to have a double variable called kgs, which will going to hold a value in kilogram from the user. Okay. So here I have kgs. I want to ask my kgtxt to give me the text. Okay, so just like we have set text, we have get text. The problem, the reason it is giving you an error, because get text returns a string in kilograms is a double. So that's why I need to do a conversion before I assign a value to double. I need to do double dot parse double. So now it will going to convert the text into a double and will then going to assign it to kgs. Okay, now I have another variable called pounds, which will take kgs, which is in kilograms, and we're going to divide it by 2.2 to convert the kilograms to pounds. Now you need to push the pounds into the txt pounds. So txt pounds dot, pounds txt, pounds txt dot set text to pounds. Now why is this giving me an error? Because pounds is of type double. Again, I need to do a conversion before I send the value into the set text. I have to now say I want the double to be converted to an equivalent string. So when I read a string, I convert it to double. When I push it back, I convert it back to a string. So now when I run this program, I have a kilograms in which I put a value and I press process. It gives me an output. If I click reset, it will reset both boxes. Now it's up to me if I want to round these numbers, which I can do by simply saying math.round. If I want to preserve the decimal places, I can then multiply it by 100 and divide it by 100.0. So that's the old-fashioned approach. That first you multiply by 100 and then dividing by 100.0 will shift those many decimal places over. So I first round it and then shift the decimal places. So 45.785 process rounded to 20.81, rounds to 2 decimal places. Reset will simply reset everything. There's one more thing I would like to do inside the container, inside the constructor, is I want my pounds txt to be set to uneditable by the user. So now when you run it, it is grayed out. So if you push a value, it will be able to display the values, just read only. So in VB, you set the read-only property to true. Here it's called set editable to false. So it's the same deal. If you learn a new language, they all have same features. They just call them different things. So did you guys understand what you did here? Yes? So we declared objects. Then we add those objects into a container. Before we added it, we set the layout. The layout defines how these objects will going to appear on the container. The objects that were supposed to respond to an event, we add action listener to them, and that required us to incorporate an interface of action listener. As a result, we were forced to write action perform. Now, since the action perform is shared between all the items that are using action listener, therefore we wrote an if-else-if structure to differentiate between which one of the two items was clicked. And that was done by utilizing an object of action event type, getSource method, and comparing it against the name of the button. When we found whichever of the two was clicked, then we wrote our code logic. For the reset, we called the setText method on both text boxes and set it to nothing. For process, we grabbed the value from the text box, converted it into double because we wanted to use it in calculations. After we calculated the output, we converted back to a string and then stored it in the other text box. In the main method, we simply instantiated an object of frame type. We set the size of the frame. Conversion form was the title of the frame. We made it visible, and we set the default operation to close. Okay? Next, what I would like to do here in the remaining 5 minutes is I want to copy these 4 lines, rather cut these 4 lines, cut them, cut these 4 lines, and paste them inside the constructor and remove the form reference. These items can be done in the constructor as well. If you run it, we're going to give you the exact same output. So instead of the main, we have pushed it into the initiation process of the frame. The other thing you will find Java developers do, and the reason they will do this, because now in the main, there's no reason of having a named object because the named object is not being used anymore. So they rather do something like this. Create an unnamed object, simply call the constructor, generate a frame, because they're not referencing that guy anywhere after that line. And if you run it, it generates the same output. Also, let's try to create a new class. We're going to call this new class use calculate form. use calculate form with a public static void main and click finish. In this main method, just simply code new followed by Java GUI app1. Since they are in the same project, they can see each other, right? Now run this guy. You get the same form, push a value, process it, reset it. So